I'm losing my sanity. It's so bloody warm in this office at the minute. We're having a massive heat wave in the UK, and it's just like I can't have the air conditioning on because it'll make sound. I have to. I'm doing this for the podcast. I'm sweltering. I'm melting.
Our air too. So
Oh goodness!
It's not as hot here, but
this is what we do for you viewers. We suffer to make great content, and yeah. Well, I don't think. Well, Gabe's in a nice, basement, and I don't think. Is it really that hot there for you, Gabe?
I'm super comfortable.
Well, there we go. See, there is a name for these people, isn't there? Like people that do all of it. What's the name for?
Jack of all trades, master.
Jack of all trades. Isn't it called a predator as well? Producer, editor.
Yeah,
Oh,
it is.
I know there's a few predators in Hollywood, but we're not going to get into that. Anyway.
yeah, that's a whole different conversation.
So, who wants to wrap up this week's episode?
Deb? Just kidding. Welcome to episode 11 of Get a Grip. In our first episode, we talked about the challenges of video production and running your own business, and we'd like to move further on in that conversation today, but with a special guest, someone who's been doing this longer than perhaps all three of us combined, where we can really talk about how the industry has changed over time, moving from linear tape through all the way through digital video production, and now with online content, and how that has changed the industry and changed what is expected of us. So our guest is Deb Eschweiler. I met her at the Final Cut Pro 10 Creative Summit in 2017, and we've kept in touch since then. And we thought that she would be the perfect guest for this episode. So I would just like to introduce Deb. How are you doing?
Great. Nice to be here.
Thank you. Now, could you give us a little background on how you got started and then what you're doing now?
Well, the short version is in high school, back before high schools generally had media departments, I got involved in a program for students who were kind of bored in high school, but were still relatively decent students. It was called the Mentor Connection. And a lot of my classmates from around, it was county-wide, so I went to this program with students who were from other high schools. And some of them went on to be like electrical engineers and chemical engineers and pretty amazing software coders back in the COBOL and I can't even remember, that's a really long time ago. And what I was really fascinated by at the time was film editing. I thought that the tactile, putting two pieces of film together and making something new. But unfortunately at the time, in the Twin Cities, which is Minneapolis and St. Paul and Minnesota, for those of your audience who aren't familiar with that term, there wasn't a lot of film editing happening. There was some, but not as much as there was video editing. So the organizers of the program decided to send me to, originally they wanted to send me to one of the news stations because they had a contact there, the program. But they didn't want to send me in cold. So they sent me to one of the local cable stations that was just like not even a mile from my house to learn the basics about video production. And it ended up being, I said this is going to be the short version, didn't I? It ended up being that I ended up working so well with the man who was the basically the video generalist at that cable station that I stayed with him for my entire year for that program. And he's still to this day is a dear friend of mine. So, and that was, well, I'm not going to tell you exactly how many years it's been, but there's zeros after that.
Okay.
Wow, okay.
So that's where I learned video production in general as a junior in high school. And then I went on to college, and I went to one of the few schools in the Twin Cities metro area that was teaching video production, because again, it wasn't as widely taught outside of the technical schools, as a matter of fact, the University of Minnesota, the year before I graduated, had decided to close down their video production program. So there was only one school in the Twin Cities that I could go to that wasn't just a technical program, and I did want the 4-year degree. I wanted a liberal arts background.
Okay.
The other school that was close enough to be, home, near enough home, was a school my sister was going to. I didn't really want to go to the same school my sister went to. So that one wasn't really an option. So nothing against my sister, but when you're that, when you're 3 years apart in age, you want to go to some place where you can be you and not somebody's little sister.
That's fair, yeah.
So after that, I studied art history. So I have a double major in art history and video production. And I will tell you this, the gentleman who hired me for my first long-term staff job after I got out of college, which was like my third job out of college, said he was really, after a while, after I'd been working for him for a while, said he was really more interested in my art history major than he was my video production major. Because he said that he probably could teach almost anyone how to push the buttons in the right order. This is back when there were buttons. But he didn't know if he could teach someone to know whether it looked good or not. Okay. So that part of my background, this, studying art and knowing art, was important to him. And that was one of the reasons why he offered me the job.
So I have a quick question just related to this part of the art versus the more technical things. Would you say that your knowledge in art would be related to a soft skill, for example, because pretty much is this good or bad is very subjective, and in art school you learn how subjective things are all the time, right? How much would you consider your knowledge in arts being a technical thing or a hard skill, and how much of it you would consider being a soft skill?
I'd have to say it's a soft skill, because there's a difference between knowing that it looks good and being able to make it look good. Because I still, to a certain degree, rely on really good graphic artists. If I'm given great elements as an editor, I can make things look great. But, if I have to start from scratch in Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop or whatever to design something, I am not, as my background, I am not going to end up with as nice looking of a end result. But if I have elements that are designed by an artist, I'm going to be able to make it do something better.
Yeah, and the reason why I even asked about that is because in the past, with my experience, I've seen a lot of people being hired because of their hard skills, knowing how to push the buttons and do things, and being fired because of their soft skills. And when I mentioned soft skills in the past, was like about knowing how to treat others and approaching a situation and talking to management and talking to a client and things like that. But then when you're talking about art and really knowing, being able to judge if something is good, if it's gonna bring a good result in the end, I totally see why the person would have hired you, because of your vision, because of your knowledge in art, because of that soft skill. Then, like him said, right, you can teach anyone else to push the buttons.
Definitely, yeah. And I've watched a lot of people navigate their careers over the years, and I've seen really talented, really smart people end up losing clients or losing jobs because they never have quite figured out how to have those conversations without insulting or annoying the crap out of other people. And it doesn't matter how right you are, if you make the other person feel like an idiot. If they're the person writing you the check at the end of the day, they're not going to write you another one. They're not going to pick up the phone and call you. Doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't matter if you're the best at what you do, because there's always going to be somebody else who can get the job done.
It also works the other way around, I find, as well, because if the client thinks they know what they're doing as well, and they kind of encroach on the job of the video person, I've had moments in my kind of early start as a business where I've had clients say, oh, we've got a phone that can do the same thing, why do we need you, kind of stuff, So it can kind of work the other way as well, that I've noticed. I've only been running for about, I don't know, nearly 2 years now. And I've noticed the same thing on the flip side, on the reverse side, because I've always kind of treated the client as a, they're the one paying my bills. I want to kind of keep them happy, but also not, like, be at their beck and call all the time. I kind of want to have some creative input in the project. But I have found it's also on the flip side that it can happen where some clients can belittle me into thinking I don't know what I'm doing, which is kind of sad, really.
That is a fine line to walk, yeah.
Yeah, it is a very fine line to walk.
From that company, how did you get from there to where you are now? You've been freelancing for 18 years, I think?
About 18 years.
Okay.
I'll hit my 19th year at the end of the year. So my best piece of advice I give everybody is make your last day the first day of the month. If you're leaving a job. That was my biggest mistake that I made leaving my job, was I wanted to start, my last day was December 31st, 1999, because I wanted to start the new millennium as my own boss.
Ah.
And that was the stupidest thing I ever did.
Wow. Well, it's got a good ring to it, starting the millennium as your own boss. But,
Exactly.
Yeah, can kind of see why, going into it head first, yeah.
Because if I would have, I would have gotten a day of holiday pay on the new year, and I would have had an extra month of health insurance.
There we go.
So learn from my mistakes, people.
Well, we will talk about lots of those.
Oh, yeah.
First of all, why did you decide to go solo, and then how did you go about doing that?
I worked at my last staff job for about 6 years. I started as an assistant editor, and I was promoted after 3 years to editor. And I wanted to have the title of editor for a good solid 3 years. So when I went out on my own, I could say I was an editor at a post-production house for 3 years, because that seemed to be a really strong number. So, because they say 3 to 5 years experience.
Yep.
So that was one of the reasons that because I'd actually been offered to work with some other freelancers before that for 18 months before that. It's like, come out into the freelance pool. We've got some work we could give you. But it didn't feel like it was the right time, because I thought that you needed that 3 to 5 years experience to be taken seriously. For some reason, that 3 years felt like a magic number to me. Mm-hmm. The company had also grown quite a bit. I mean, I was employee number 11.
Wow.
Okay.
And by the time I left, they had merged with another company. And at one point, there had been over 100 employees. And then there had been some reorganization and kind of had settled back to around 80 or so. And then the company it kind of had changed direction. And there wasn't really a good or bad thing. It was just, it wasn't the same company anymore. And it was it wasn't really, I just didn't see the company going in the same direction that I really felt like I wanted my career to go.
You were growing in a different direction, and they were growing in a different direction, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the owners of the company are wonderful people, and I still think the world of them. So I actually stayed and freelanced for them for about 2 months afterwards. Okay. And then when another editor left, about a year later, they called me and I freelanced again for about another month, until they figured out what to do after he left. So, I left on really good terms, and I left on my own terms, which was also kind of awesome.
So when you started freelancing, if that was 18 years ago, that would be around 2000. And that, if I remember correctly, is around when digital video was becoming a thing. In the middle of the transition from analog to digital.
Yeah.
And so most of your background, particularly if you went to school, would have been tape machines, correct?
And we had a non-linear offline to linear online workflow at the facility. So we would do our offlines in Avid, Media Composer, and then we'd bring an EDL into the linear rooms and reassemble and do our graphics and finishing.
Okay.
And the editors would do the whole soup to nuts. So we didn't have an offline editor and then an online editor.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
some places in town did have that setup where one editor would do the offline, and then one editor would do the finishing.
Mm-hmm.
But we shepherded our projects from the beginning to the end.
So you've got a lot of experience in both worlds, doing
Yeah.
both things.
So and I did some online finishing for even some broadcast projects in standard definition. I missed early high definition because that was all happening when I was just starting my business, and that was really expensive to get into. So
Oh, yeah.
So I wasn't doing that because my clients weren't doing that at the beginning. Because when you're just starting your business, you're starting small. So
Yeah, I didn't start shooting 8K red footage either.
exactly.
I'm not
Yeah.
there now, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
High definition was my 8K red footage.
Yeah, I've just started shooting 4K, so like I'm new to the whole, you know, new format, new resolution thing. As I had I think my first camera was a standard F camera. Then I went straight to HD, and then I'm now on 4K. So yeah, I've done 3 iterations in the past like 10 years. It's kind of crazy how quickly it's progressed to this new kind of format. So there's one thing actually I do want to talk to you about, which is kind of going back a little bit. I might have swaying a little bit, but there was a bit where you mentioned kind of going into kind of from my perspective, because I'm new. I've got a new business. This is my new business. I've been doing it for about a year now. And what would you say to people that want to jump in and start their own business? Because for me, I literally started this straight out of college, straight out of university in the UK. So literally I finished uni and then I started my own business. I had no prior experience to work in. I had been freelance through university and through kind of on and off. And I thought, you know what, I want to be my own boss. I don't need to listen to. I was that, during that phase where I don't need to listen to my lecturers because they don't know anything, kind of thing. But I understand now that maybe going into a position where I could have learned a little bit would have been very beneficial. And that's something I've kind of said to people: don't start your own business straight away. Go into it. Like, what would you kind of reflect that, or would you say just ignore that and go straight in, or what would you kind of, based on your experience, what would you say?
Well, I think there's value in having a mentor, but I don't necessarily think that you need to work for someone else if you can find a strong mentor that can help you, navigate those waters.
Okay.
Especially if you feel like you have the strong skills. Because part of it is because the democratization has made everything so accessible now.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at that very first room that I edited in cost $250,000 to build. And the A suite that I didn't edit in because I was, when I got promoted, I was the lowest editor in the chain. So they didn't let me edit in that room very often, but that cost $750,000 to build.
Yeah, it's just scary to see how. Well, not scary. I suppose it's very, empowering to kind of see the diminishing costs for a lot of, production and equipment, and being able to actually. I mean, Final Cut Pro and for Resolve's free for one. If you have a computer capable enough to run it, Final Cut Pro 10 is the same processor as a full version of Resolve. I think it's like what, $299, I believe, and that kind of sudden drop from $750,000 to like, oof. I mean, that's quite empowering for kind of new filmmakers and new content creators because it's accessible.
It removes a lot of the barriers of entry, so a lot more people can
Yeah.
do this a lot more easily now.
Which is a good and a bad thing, I suppose.
That ups your rate of competition if
Yeah,
everybody
exactly.
is doing it to a point. But then I think that is where the soft skills or the art background that Deb mentioned is what would kind of separate the really good people with cameras versus the people who just have cameras and know how to push buttons. So I think now more than ever, a background or an interest in the arts is what's going to differentiate somebody with a camera from somebody who has a camera and no art background or interest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and then you even think about it in 2003, 2004, because I didn't even start building my room right away. Because I was just going in and using other people's equipment. I called it OPAs, other people's Avids. Yeah. I would go into, like, corporate media departments and use their Avids for the first few years, or I go into like some of the corporate departments would have online suites, and I go in and use their online suites and do tape-to-tape linear, before online or non-linear took over completely. So it was still a couple of years before I started building my suite, and my suite was built kind of by accident because I had one of the editors who trained me bought a new Macintosh and sold me his blue and white G3 for like a ridiculous amount of money, and it had this product, you may have heard of it, called Final Cut Pro version 1.5.
Wow.
And he said, you might want to learn how to use this. And it had a couple internal hard drives to put the media on. And I banged my head against the wall trying to learn how to use it because it didn't work like Avid. And I eventually ended up doing some training on it because I couldn't get it to do things I wanted it to do because it didn't work like Avid. And once I had gone through the training, it made a lot more sense to me. So that's why I recommend training to people.
That sounds familiar. Very familiar.
I'm having flashbacks to 2011.
Yeah.
And then a client, I think what ended up happening was this is a long time ago, the guy who I bought it from told a client that I had Final Cut Pro because he was booked and didn't have time to do a project, and he should call me. And I was not set up to do client work. It was just, I'm just learning how to do this. It's not, I wasn't ready to do real client, billing paid work on this system. I'm still going out to other people's studios.
So he threw you in the deep end, really.
He really did. And, this is a guy who trained me. So he kind of knew what I was, how I learned and what I was capable of. And he loaned me his DV cam deck because this was still tape. This is in the days of things were on tape. Mm-hmm. And I think I hooked up an old television because I didn't have real monitors. So I could see what I was doing because you always had to have real monitors back in those days. And I worked with that system for a while until in 2003, I bought a G5, which I'm still working. I still make money with that thing.
Whoa.
It's right over there.
That's a good user story for Apple.
There we go.
How old is that machine?
2003, so what, 15
Over
years?
10, yeah, wow.
I have clients who call me up, they want to do history videos, and they'll ship me out some beta SP, digital beta tapes, and I will digitize or ingest and do a little history video for them in standard definition, because that's what their source media is.
Do you think he did that for a reason? Sorry, to kind of backtrack to kind of what you were originally making, because you meant to kind of jump to the deep end. Do you think he did that for a reason so you could learn on your feet? Because to me, that seems like something that somebody would either do to me or I would take on to learn. I did that with Final Cut Pro 10 actually. I think it was version 10.0.6, and I was learning it whilst on a gig. It was just wedding videos, but just wedding videos is very it's not just wedding videos, but like. I had to learn the software. I had to kind of, get on my feet and learn it. Do you think that helped you learn quicker or learn slower? What was the kind of, unless you might have learned before the project started. I don't actually,
no, because I banged my head against the wall quite a bit before I ended up deciding to do that training. So I think I did the training in 2005. Mm-hmm. So well after I'd had the G5.
Okay.
But as far as the editor who trained me throwing those projects, I don't know if it was him thinking, I think it was just more him thinking I could do it. Mm-hmm. And him knowing that he didn't have the time to do it. Mm-hmm. I don't know how magnanimous the decision was. It was just as much as it's just, I don't have time to do this.
So it wasn't like the guru sending the student out on an adventure that he knew she wasn't ready for, but he knew that she could handle it.
Like the rite of passage kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure it was that deep as much as it was, I'm going to give this to Deb because I know she's not going to try to poach my client in the end. And to be honest, that is one of the reasons I think I am still here today, is because most people know that that's not who I am.
Yeah.
That I will turn around, and if an editor gives me a project and gives me a client, that I will always have their back, and I will always give their client back.
That's very respectful. Yeah.
Well, poaching clients is one of those
Yeah.
soft skills. You just don't do that. It's a dishonest, mischievous way of running a business. A few years ago, I was doing work as a freelancer for another production company, and they started getting scared as I was growing that I was going to poach their clients. So I just severed ties. My contract with them has ended. I still haven't gone after their clients. So yeah, I wholeheartedly agree that they've spent time and money building up a relationship with these people. Who am I to come in and take that away from them?
I wouldn't do that for any of the other clients that I've worked for either. So it's it's just respectful, because it's like you've put so much effort and work into getting the client yourself, and then somebody comes along and nabs them away from you. It's like, come on,
Well, yeah, and even though we're running separate companies, so technically we're
Yeah.
competitors. I don't want them to lose their houses and not be able to feed their families.
Exactly,
I want them to
yeah.
be successful as well. So let them have what they've invested their
there's
time
enough
and
for
money in.
everybody.
Yes.
Yeah. But then again, to be fair, that if somebody keeps coming back to me,
Oh, yeah.
and I keep saying you should talk to this other editor, and this has happened to me, the producer finally said, you need to stop saying that because it's not going to happen.
Yeah, if the client is genuinely unhappy with that person, then
Yeah.
open game.
That they chose you.
It becomes buyer's remorse at that point. Like, it's a case of, finding the right things.
Zooming out a bit, apart from the obvious things like you started with tape and now it's all digital, and you were working on Avid, and now I understand you're using Final Cut 10 at least some of the time, if not most of the time. Apart from those obvious things, what stands out to you most as far as how the entire video production industry has changed? Not Hollywood, but just more what we're doing corporate and broadcast from, say, 18 years ago until today.
Well, I do have to say, when I go out to clients still, and I do still have a fair amount of clients where I'm going into their facilities, most of them are Adobe houses. So I'm
Yeah.
working on Premiere.
Okay.
So I still have my foot in the Adobe pool. And
We're sorry.
Well, I'm
So
stuck in there. I'm stuck in there too sometimes with After Effects and Photoshop. So
Yeah.
I've not been able to leave either.
Good apps. I'm just not a fan of the company. That's just me.
And then I have some broadcast clients that are Avid houses.
I would expect that.
So I keep my Avid license active for that, and they do the traditional offline. They have offline editors and then an online finisher. So I just do Avid offlining for them, send them my bins, and their online editor does the finishing.
Okay.
That works out really well for that situation.
That's good.
So, and then when I have a choice and I'm in my own studio and it makes the most sense, I do like Final Cut 10 because I still have not quite figured it out why I am so much faster.
Oh, I see. Okay. I thought you were going to say, I'm still not figured out the whole system, but
Oh,
that's
no,
a
no,
nice
no.
twist on that one. I was expecting not that. So,
No, and I am fast, and I've always been fast, and I've been told that I have to slow down because I crash computers, because I'm impatient and I click things. I click too many things in too quick of a succession, and I bring computers to their knees.
that's me.
You've lost many keyboards to fires.
Not quite that, but
Yeah.
and in the early Final Cut days, I would do my estimates for clients based on how in the Final Cut Classic days and the Avid days, how long I thought it would take a project, and then I'd sit down and do it in Final Cut 10, and we'd
Be half or something silly. Like,
yeah,
it'd be-
and it's like, well, we still have time to, we could do more of this, we could do more of that. It's like, no, the client's really happy with it, we're done. And I'm like, but there's still time and money on the table. So, and well, the client's really happy with this, we're done. And it's like, but there's still time and money on the table.
that's
That's something we've talked about before.
yeah.
Should we be penalized for being efficient? So if you can do it in half the time, does that mean you get paid half as much? or
More, twice as much.
would you charge the same because it's still the same project that they budgeted for, or do you then, when given the choice, do you then put in the extra time to polish more? Like, how do you approach that?
It's a tough call because budgets keep dropping.
Yep.
So
It's
it's
true.
like you keep trying to just get back to where, I used to have a $10,000 budget for a video used to be, people used to, for just editing, for just my part, not for the whole video.
I'd
Just,
love that. I'd love a budget like that right now.
yeah, I used to think that, getting 10 to 15 days to edit was,
I feel like I'm lucky if I get 2 or 3 days tops.
yeah.
No. Well, on the flip side, though, individual budgets are clearly much smaller than they used to be. I mean, I know companies who still get $30,000 videos. I don't frequently get projects like that, but it also seems to me that the number of people who need videos is exponentially larger than it used to be. I mean, you used to get 30K, 50K because it was a larger corporation coming in and seeking out a production house, whereas now it could be anybody needs a video produced professionally. So have you experienced that as well? That obviously the budgets have dropped, but the amount of potential clients you could bring in are a lot greater than used to be the case.
More smaller companies are wanting to do video, but they're still sticker shock at how much it costs to get creative video. And even though going back to how much it used to cost to build a room, and then and even my room when I built it was I said $750,000 to build that A suite. My room when I first built it cost less than 10% of that, but to even build a new room now is even less. I don't need a lot of what I put in that room in 2003, 2004. So it would cost even less to build a new room from scratch now. So it costs so much less to build a room, so people devalue the talent it takes
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
to make the same quality of final product.
Give it all the same quality, but
and really, it's
cheaper.
higher quality.
Yeah.
Because
Exactly,
yeah.
now the stuff's gotten cheaper, but instead of standard definition, we're cutting 4K.
Or 6K or 8K stuff. If you're
Sure.
watching some people on YouTube that are doing like Marcus, is it Marcus Brownlee who does like 8K videos and then or 6K videos and then
Does
just
8K, yeah.
and then just
Yeah.
down reses them all to 1080 for YouTube or 4K for YouTube. I'm like, what are you doing, you madman?
Well, even
Why-
even these episodes are usually 3, 4K
Yeah.
cameras
Yeah.
that we can share the media in a day, and I can cut them in a day, and it's a pretty involved show. But 10 years ago, you could have never dreamed of doing that.
Yeah, exactly. It comes back to that democratization that we mentioned before, where like the cost of doing stuff has come down dramatically, and
Yeah.
on the same basis of that, it's great that people have that door now that's a little bit more open than it used to be. But then again, you do have this oversaturation. I beg your pardon. Anyway, we do have this oversaturation of content creators now. That again, it comes back down to the art degree versus no art degree. It's like having that democratization is great, but it does open up a lot more opportunities for more competition. So
Yeah, and a lot of people can just hang out a shingle, buy a camera, and say, I'm in business. And you don't know what they know. Because you can just, order a camera and, you don't know if they actually know how to use it.
That's where now I have a demo reel that nobody's ever asked to see. I put it up just because at the time I was like, oh, you need a demo reel. But what I found is that by putting my portfolio on my website, or just a bunch of videos that I've done from different categories and different clients, that's what's helped, because people can watch that and then decide, can I use this camera or not? Can I light or record audio? So since if we're freelance or running a small business, you kind of have to be your own salesman or saleswoman. What would you say about having a demo reel / a portfolio online nowadays? What's your take on that?
Well, that is one of those topics that do as I say and not as I do, because my website is a travesty and it's mostly broken, and I need to be working on it. And I eventually ended up just uploading my 2 demo reels to YouTube because I did get asked for them. Can I see some of your work? And it's like, because I did throw together a website a number of years ago, back in the iWeb days.
Oh wow, I remember that. Oh wow, I missed that. I missed that application.
I actually missed that too.
Yeah, I really do.
And I do have a page that has it's 2 pages of a bunch of finished videos. So it is the portfolio, but it's private, so it's not out there for everyone to see, because my clients are, I always get permission, of course, but my clients are kind of like, well, we don't really want this out there in public, and so I tell them that it's a private link, and only people who ask to see my work can see these videos. So it's not on YouTube, it's not on Vimeo, it's not, it's not going to be trolled by bots, and it's not going to be, downloaded or, accessed, except by people who want to be assured that I have done good work in the past, and that's its only purpose in life. So I can't put those clips on YouTube. So right now, the only thing on YouTube are my demo reels, which are just one's 2.5 minute, eye candy piece, and the other one's, I call it my long form in meetings demo reel, which shows, it's a little bit longer, that shows some longer pieces and some stuff that ends up on, a lot of my work is for corporate meetings and events, so it ends up on the big screen in ballrooms. So to show off some of that stuff. So it's less of the flash and trash, more of the content.
Yeah, that's a tricky thing I found with putting together a demo reel. If you want to keep it 1 to 2 minutes long, if a lot of your stuff is long form, how do you show in a demo reel, say, the heart of a scene?
Yeah.
If you can only show 2 seconds of it.
Yeah.
So it's tricky.
I've been doing it. I've seen a couple. I've actually kind of had the similar thoughts in the past, where it's like, if it's scripted stuff, like if you're doing a reel, I'm in 2 minds about having reels for editors, specifically. Motion graphics is a bit differently, because I do a lot of motion graphics as well. For editors, I've kind of felt like you're just doing scenes for that are like, 15 seconds, so a scene from a short or from a feature you've cut, a bit from a corporate video, and then you can go, string some together or put them up as separate clips and go, here's other stuff I've done for the corporate sector, all stuff I've done for narrative and documentary, and just having little clips rather than having a 2-minute long reel, for me works, because A, you get to see the editing, B, you get to see the context of what it is, and C, I don't see the point of putting loads of clips really fast to music as an editor's reel, because you're re-editing an edited piece and it's breaking the context of the piece for the reason why it was edited. So that's kind of why I'm in 2 minds about having a reel anymore, to be honest, and just having a projects page with everything listed. Like, I've got that, I know Gabe's got that on his website as well, where you just have you can click on what video you want to watch and you can watch it. And I think that speaks more than just having a reel nowadays, at least.
Which is funny to me, because that's exactly what I did for my reel. I had my composer write some fast music, and I just boom, boom, boom. Let's just punch the audience in the face with a bunch of impressions of things. And if they want to watch more, just watch the videos on the portfolio.
Yeah. I've done it for my reel as well, like, it's because it's a norm, I suppose, but I've never got my head wrapped around it, especially for editors, and for motion graphics is different. I know somebody who does, who actually does a thing for actors, does actors show reel pieces, where he gets 2 actors, they script out a scene, they both play 2 parts, and you both use the video for their show reel, and it's a short scene. It's like 1 to 2 minutes long, but A, showcases the editing, and he uses them for his show reels, showcases the actors that he's used, the scripting, the story, the pacing, and he just uses them for his show reels, and that speaks more for an editor to me.
I think the editor show reel that we have nowadays, it's more a show reel for a DP than for an editor.
Yeah, very much so.
Point.
Very much so.
Well, so we're talking about DP, we're talking about editing, we're talking about motion graphics. Nowadays, we're expected to do all these different things.
All
We
of
have to
them.
wear so many hats. Deb, when
Yeah.
you started, you got to be more of a dedicated craftsperson. You got to focus, say, specifically on editing. What do you think is the good that's come out of us being expected to do more, and what are some of the negatives of that?
It is kind of a double-edged sword. And just to go back, one of the things for the demo reel that is, it's just put all the famous faces. Anything you've
Yeah,
done that has a famous
exactly.
face. It's like,
Yeah.
I did stuff that she wasn't a senator at the time, but one of our state senators or U.S. senators was, I did some green screen stuff with her when she was in a different job. So it's like I can put her face in my demo reel because I did every year I did a video with her
That's
in
kind
it.
of what
you know.
clickbait is now on YouTube,
Yeah.
kind of thing. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like, look at this
Yeah.
famous person in my show reel. But I've done
Yeah.
exactly the same thing. I've got Ian McNeice, who was
Yeah.
in Ace Ventura 2 with Jim Carrey, and I've got him on my show reel because I did a feature film with him, and he's a British actor. So it's like I'll put him on my show reel,
Yeah.
front and center, so that when people click it, they just see everything else.
Yeah,
As the
and-
thumbnail.
And then I did some boxing stuff for one of the satellite companies. So I have a lot of boxers in my demo reel because it's like,
Yeah, it's fair
it's
enough.
like,
Yeah.
hey, just if
You
it's
gotta
a
get them
famous face,
views.
put them in
You
there.
gotta get them views. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But as far as it's the jobs used to be, you were a shooter, you were an editor, you were an audio mixer, you were a composer, you were a graphics designer, you were a motion
Get your
graphics.
own-
That
Get your own
that's
spot. Yeah.
yeah. And so for the longest time, I knew nothing about audio, and that was definitely my weakest area because we just everything we did we sent across the hall to the audio studio, and I didn't really have to know anything other than make sure it was make sure the levels were there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Don't clip.
Don't clip them.
Yeah. And we had to do some graphics. We had to do some, because we had our DVEs, we had our kaleidoscope, we had our Sony DME 3000s, I think it was, in the other rooms. So we did, some motion graphic design in the suites. But, for the really heavy hitting stuff, we had, Joe or Tom with the flame in the other, in the back doing, the fancy stuff. So
Do you think that most of the... In fact, I'll just go back a bit and catch that back up again, so that bit isn't in there. Do you think that most of the reason why we've kind of assimilated these other roles that we have to kind of learn and kind of think on our feet? For me personally, I think it comes from two areas. I don't know if other people will agree. One, YouTube and online content creation, kind of people doing solo shooting like we're doing. We're victims to our own demise, really. So the YouTube and film schools, in my opinion, because especially at my university where it wasn't exactly a film school, it was a film course, media production, and we had to make our own short films where we had to write, direct and produce, as well as cast and, maybe be on camera for other people's, maybe be, first AC, first AD on other people's shoots. So we had a mixture of roles to kind of go through. So that for me kind of set me up for having to wear all these different hats at different points. Do you think it's kind of a mixture of that, or where do you think most of that has come from the modern day shooter? There is a name for these people, isn't there? Like people that do all of it. What's the name for?
Jack of all trades, master
Jack
of
of all
none.
trades. Isn't it called a predator as well? Producer, editor.
Yeah,
Oh,
it is.
I know there's a few predators in Hollywood, but we're not going to get into that. Anyway.
yeah, that's a whole different conversation. Yeah, and I know, especially in the live event world, I probably have I've stopped doing the on-site happy faces videos that I used to do with a producer and a shooter, where we used to go out as a team. The producer would organize everything, she'd shoot with the shooter, and bring everything to me, and I'd edit it pretty much overnight. And we'd turn out some really great product because there's three of us. But 3 people is expensive. Mm-hmm. And then they found one guy who said he could do that for, not only for, probably less than the day rate than each one of us was doing. But he was providing all the gear for less than our day rate
Wow.
and doing 3 jobs.
That's, yeah. I've had that happen to me on a few occasions where I quoted a job to film. They wanted to do a charity event. It was a charity event, but it was a case one of those things where I had to rent the equipment and had to get the stuff in. So they had a budget enabled, and I kind of give them a quote that said it's going to be, I can't remember what the amount was. It's going to be X amount, and I said, "Oh, that's too much." I'm like, "Well, we kind of discussed that they wanted 4 days shooting, and 4 days editing, and it's like, that's going to cost a bit because A, I need to rent the equipment, and B, I need to pay my time." And he said, "Well, our other guy can do it for much cheaper than that." And apparently, the other guy was doing for about half of what I had done per day. And it's like, how can you bill that much and charge that much and make a living and support yourself? Like, I don't. It's one of those things where it's really frustrating. It's probably as we mentioned before, somebody who's got a camera but doesn't have the knowledge behind it and doesn't know how to take it forward, and it's really frustrating and really irritating when something like that was a triple figure budget and quote, and he literally kind of slashed you in half, and I think he did it for like 75 a day or something stupid, and it was like, how the hell can you do that for that much?
A couple of things, though, as far as from my point of view, is I charge a fair amount more now than when I started. But I quickly learned that having a business model where your number one rule is just to undercut everybody is not a self-sustaining business model. You can't,
No, it isn't.
You
Not
can't
at all.
survive on that. In the very beginning, you take what you can get. But not only are you limiting your income, you're limiting the types of jobs you can get. Because a lot of
Yes.
companies, if you quote them too low, they're just going to scoff at you. They'll assume you're an amateur and just starting out.
There's that Goldilocks zone, isn't there, where you're not too high, not too low, but you're just right. And because I've had other people say, "Well, I charge this much," and they turn me down. And it's like, well, you're charging too low. My friend had a similar situation recently where he's doing a drone stuff and he's having difficulty deciding where to place his, because he's doing a commercial drone course. People are charging £400 a day for that kind of stuff. That's probably like $800 or something stupid, $600 a day, which isn't far off kind of what I've heard that you normally charge, or what
I
other
would
people
call it
normally
low,
charge.
that still.
Yeah.
To spin this around, though, all three of us, since we came up pretty much in the digital video realm, we are to Deb what those people we're talking about are to us. Because she came up through all this with these
Sorry.
larger budgets and these bigger clients, and so we were the ones who kind of shook up the industry she was established in. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's very true.
Sorry,
yeah.
that $750,000 room went for $4,000 a day.
That's
But
crazy.
what it took to support that room was significant.
Yeah.
What it took to pay off that room was significant.
So people got it lucky now, pretty much, when it comes to, starting, picking up a camera. I mean, most people are going to be shooting on these, let's be honest. These are going to be the kind of majority of what people are filming on for a lot of content.
That's what humans are going to be filming on, but if we're going
That's true.
if we're going to separate humans
Humans.
from video professionals, we might as well. Then they're not going to be using that phone. And we're lucky in the sense that our cost of entry is cheaper.
That's, yeah.
You can shoot a 4K camera for less than $2,000, but you're expected to do more. So the time investment in learning these different things is
Don't get
more
me wrong.
challenging than
I
in the
can
past.
appreciate somebody picking up a camera and then learning the craft, and then going out and going, we actually want to do this properly, and I'm going to go out and learn how to actually compose a good shot, rather than just pick up a camera and going, right, I'm going to start paying for video production. I'm going to start doing weddings now, and I have learnt nothing about the craft. I'd rather be undercut by somebody who knows what the hell they're doing than by somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. If that makes sense.
And that does go back to what you were saying about just starting your business fresh out of university and
Exactly, yeah.
Those kids who may not have a background in running a business don't know that they're undercutting, because they just threw out a shingle and they just said, I bought some gear and my rent is this much a month, and they probably never even did a an analysis of what it costs. They just think that, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, there is something. The cost of doing business is actually a very good thing to do.
Well, and Deb, so you would have seen over the years a number of freelancers and production companies come and go. Mm-hmm. The types of things that cause them to fail, has that been consistent over the years, or has that changed over time? What's that dynamic?
Well, I've watched the big companies fold, and I've watched a lot of little companies just kind of peter out.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And it's kind of it's a little bit different, but it's in some ways it's the same. A lot of it is just business changes, and I personally have weathered 3 huge dips in business, and when the first one hit, there's nothing prepares you for going 7 months and only working 7 days.
Yeah.
When the first time that happens, and you're making the phone calls, and you're just trying to figure out what just happened, and there's just nobody's working, nothing is happening. It's just how do you survive that? And you survive that by having savings. That's how you survive that. And you
Banking 101. Yeah.
Yeah. And you survive that by living within your means. Mm-hmm. And so I started calling some of the independent producers that I had known from my staff job, and just talking to them about what is happening, what is going on, how do we deal with this. And basically the advice that I got was, if you can survive this, what happens is people leave the industry, they leave the market, and when the business comes back, the business comes back and we have a cleaner playing field.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you can survive it,
There's some sort of natural selection going on with businesses and video production.
That is a way to look at it. So then when it happened the second time, it wasn't easy, but it was, it was a little less daunting, maybe. Yeah.
The blow was softened, you could say, kind of thing, yeah.
But then when the third one hit, it was kind of like, I started to feel like it was like the third major disruption in the industry that I'd witnessed since I started, which the first major was nonlinear editing, which was just happening right when I started getting from tape to the computer. And then the second one was the democratization of getting out of the big edit suite into the laptop. And now it's just kind of in a way, the collapse of the big studio system. Mm-hmm. That you don't need to have a big company to do this anymore.
I was going to say, I'm in Milwaukee, so I'm hardly in the largest city in this country, but a lot of the bigger shops have folded or have, pared down their teams to half of what they were, just because their budgets can't sustain the infrastructure. Whereas for me, my infrastructure is just my house for the most part. So, it's easier for me to keep going. And I don't have any employees to fund or to pay for. So on the one hand, my costs are a lot lower, but I don't have people to help me out. So the types of jobs I can get are limited as well. So there's a positive and a negative to both working solo and having a larger company. But the larger companies are definitely struggling. They're dropping. If I do a search, I can see fewer of them over the months, and yet every month I can see some new guy coming up with a company that a year from now won't be there.
Yeah, it's like the big production companies gave way to the smaller boutiques, and now the smaller boutiques are scrambling to figure out how to stay afloat, and what niche can they fill in order to remain viable. What do they need to specialize in order to just, remain a business?
Well, you've weathered 3 of these disasters. What advice would you give to us or to anybody out there who's working solo or just trying to get started?
Well, I think it is. It's find a niche. Whether that's is it medical? Is it industrial? Is it event video, live events? Is it, you don't, maybe not, is it not specializing in a discipline within video production, but is it specializing in a type of industry?
Mm-hmm.
Your clients, and then you do have the issue of, are you competing? Are your clients competitors, and do you have,
Yeah. Is there going to be conflict of interest with other clients in that sector even? Yeah.
Because I am insulated directly from the client a lot through the independent producers. I can have, we have a lot of medical device companies in our area, so I can have, all three of the big medical device companies on my client list, but they're not sending me the checks. My independent producer clients are sending me the checks. So it's not as much of a issue for me. The only thing that I have to be careful of, if I ever am on site, is to make sure there's no folder with the other client's name that ever shows up.
Yeah.
Make sure my desktop is never going to screen, and that other client's name is never shown.
Gotcha. Yeah.
We're running close to our average video length. I wanted to end it, though, by asking you, looking at where the industry is now, with all the change you've seen over the years, when you look forward, are you pessimistic about it or optimistic?
Ooh, that's gonna be interesting.
How do you feel about, the change is it's not going to be bad for everyone, certainly.
We're doomed. No, sorry.
But I'm just curious to know, because you've been through so much more change than all of us combined. You have a very unique perspective on that.
Well, I am in graduate school.
So you did go back to school.
I did go back to school. I have about a year left in a Master's of Library and Information Science program, which you would think would mean a career change, but it's not. My goal is I'm focusing on library and information science for audiovisual archiving. So
Okay.
my goal is to, focus on digital asset management and long-term archival for, basically preserving my clients' media legacies.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Because I have boxes full of tapes and hard drives, and, sometimes, and in some cases, I'm pretty sure I have the only copy. And I think that's a bad plan.
Yeah. One of the things about our industry
Just
is
a tiny bad thing.
it's a little more tangible if it's on tape. But especially
Yeah.
nowadays, everything we produce doesn't really exist. It's just
No.
ones and zeros, which is
Yeah.
nerve-wracking. But
And it
even
does-
tape will wear out over time.
And it doesn't exist unless it exists in 3 places.
Good point. Yes.
Yep.
It's not enough to just have one backup.
So I don't think, honestly, that being just an editor is viable for the next, 20 years of my career. So I kind of needed to figure out what else I could add to that, the service that I offer my clients. And I don't think it's shooting, even though people always, when I say I'm an editor, oh, do you shoot too? And it's like, no. And I used to, my joke used to be, and I have to stop saying this, my joke used to be, I'm not a shooter because I like to edit with good video.
That's not the best sales pitch if you're advertising your shooting.
But I don't shoot, so it's,
Yeah.
I like to, I do like to edit with video shot by guys who have been doing it for a while and they know what they're doing. And if I do it, that's not going to be the same result.
I got into shooting myself somewhat by accident. I really just wanted to direct and edit, but then I quickly found that if somebody was hiring an editor, they're just going to go with the person they're hired to shoot and have them edit it because they can do both. So it's like, but if I shoot, then I already have the footage. They'll just pay me to hold on to it and edit it as well. So
Yeah.
shooting was kind of an afterthought. I've always
Same
been
here.
interested in it,
Yeah.
but my business wasn't designed around shooting at first. But I have to say that the amount of money I've spent on production gear far outweighs that which I've spent on post. So if you can avoid shooting, that's since you've already got your investment in post, you can avoid a huge extra expense.
And
except you're paying for school now. So
Well, and I do think I've lost jobs because I don't shoot, and they want a shooter editor. And I keep trying to convince people that you do tend to get a better end product when you have someone who's really good at the thing they do. And it is rare, although not impossible, it is rare that your shooter is your best editor or your editor is your best shooter.
Yeah.
And I do tell them, when you find that magical unicorn of a human being, you keep them happy and you pay them whatever they want, because
You feed them, you keep them happy, and
Yeah. And I would say that of you three, that, that's...
I'm a magical unicorn. Hire
Yes.
me, please.
Yeah, I can rock that.
A lot of the jobs I've lost out to, I have some inside information, because I do know a lot of the guys out there in the event industry, that the clients complain about the quality of their on-site faces videos at the end of the show, because they're not as good as they used to be when they hired the crew of 3 people.
It's a lot of work, I think. Especially, it's pressure on the people that are doing it as well, that are one-man bands, because they've got no one else to hold the boom pole or get focus on the camera. It is a struggle for solo shooters, and it's
That's the whole
on
point
both
of.
sides.
That's the whole meaning behind Get a Grip.
Get a grip. It is.
Yeah.
How do you move
Yeah.
from being solo to getting an assistant to help you do that, so that you can achieve the quality you couldn't possibly do alone?
Exactly.
And still pay them.
So it's really, but the clients are like, they'll complain about the quality, but they don't necessarily want to pay to get the quality back.
It's
so
a double-edged sword, and it's
it's
very.
So looking forward, it seems to me that the one thing you're saying is diversify. Be able to do other things, because that opens up the doors to types of opportunities that could come your way. But if you spread out too much, you're not going to be fully competent in any one thing.
I'd agree there. I'd agree there.
Do you have anything else?
Yeah.
Any lingering thoughts? Anything that's been bothering you that about the way things are headed in the industry?
I'm trying to make an analogy between a crepe and whatever is comes after that. When you've ruined a crepe, I don't,
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Doesn't it just become a flan or something?
Yeah.
Or crap. I mean, I don't know.
Okay, crepe and crap. Yeah, there you
Creep
go.
and crap. Yeah, there we go. It's moving on. I think that's a good place to wrap everything up, I think. I don't know about you guys. Is there anything else you kind of wanted to say to kind of finish off before we close off this episode? Or
I want to thank Deb for being patient.
Yes, thank you very much for
and
joining us. It's been
setting up her gear and hanging in with us for about an hour and 20 minutes.
yes, it's been a fantastic conversation.
You've got a ton of experience, and it's really nice to hear some of the things I already thought be verified, and also to hear some things that have got some gears spinning, things I just want to be careful
Same
of
here.
as time moves on.
All right, thank you guys ever so much for watching this week's episode of Get a Grip, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, hit the bell, subscribe to us on iTunes, and we'll see you next time. And thank you very much, Deb, and we'll see you all next time for another episode of Get a Grip. See you guys.
See ya. Thank you. Thank you, Deb.
You're welcome.
All right.
Cool.
Cool.
And cut.